Hi everybody, how are you doing? I hope things are going well and your revision is going smoothly. So, we're a few weeks away as of the time of recording from the AQA A-level exams, and I thought it was as good a time as any to put this video together again like we did last year and go through what's come up over the last few years and kind of reflect on that together and consider some possible focus areas for this year. So, let's crack on. So for social influence, in terms of what's come up, well, last year we had ethics, conformity, obedience, so explanations for those two things, and then an 8 marker on minority influence, and that focused on consistency and flexibility. Then going back, we had a little bit of Zimbardo, minority influence came up there as a 16 marker again, bit of resistance, and so on. I'm not going to read all of these out, but what I've done there is highlighted the essays or the big questions there, so you can see that minority influence, Milgram, legitimacy of authority, legitimacy and agentic state again there, ethics, conformity and authoritarian personality. What I've done down the left there with an R is just point out to you when research methods was embedded in that topic as well, so we can look for any patterns. You can see that research methods used to be quite popular on this topic. They haven't done it for the last few years. Does that mean that it might pop up there? In a way, it doesn't really matter, does it? You should know that you need to keep on top of your research methods, yeah? Paper 1 last year actually had 8 marks of stats testing, so do keep on top of all that sort of stuff. But thoughts about this year then? Obviously, this isn't, an actual kind of prediction in terms of this is what's going to happen, so you need to take it with a pinch of salt, as I said, and you need to prepare fully. But in terms of possible focus areas, I'm feeling like resistance is something that hasn't really come up very much. It's not come up as an essay. So I would prepare for something like discuss one or more explanations of resistance for 16 marks, something like that. There's probably going to be something on your key studies there somewhere. Most years there is, a specific question about your key study or a key study. Milgram came up there in 2022. We've had a few little questions on Zimbardo here and there. Would I put an essay for Zimbardo? Probably not if it was me, to be honest. I feel like Zimbardo's a bit of an easy one. I'd rather put bigger questions on more challenging topics, really, if I was AQA. But there will probably be something on your key studies somewhere. So do go over them and be aware of when you can use them. So last year, for example, in the conformity and obedience questions, they were quite open. So you could bring in knowledge of your key studies to illustrate and to explain. So keep on top of that stuff. Authoritarian personality, again, isn't something that's been specifically tested for a while now, so I would potentially make sure that you're confident with that. Social change, we haven't seen much of for a little while. It's also, although this shouldn't really come into it, is something that's being dropped from the spec from next year, so, any kind of questions they've got banked up, maybe AQA might feel like, we need to get those used up before it's too late. Like I said, that shouldn't come into it. It probably won't, but yeah, we haven't seen change for a little while, so make sure you go through your steps to social change. All right, so that's my thoughts on social influence. Let's have a little look next at memory. Okay, so again, we're going to go through topics. So last year we had some research methods. That was where the 8 marks of stats testing were. That did catch a few people out, so like I said, make sure you've gone over your stats tests. Then we had some long-term memory, so your types like procedural, episodic, semantic. We had a bit of retrieval failure, and then an 8 marker on post-event discussion. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these. I'll just pick out the key sort of points. So we had, in 2023, we had a 16 marker on eyewitness testimony again there, so that's sort of 2 years in a row, that theme. We then had a 16 marker before that on the working model, 16 marker before that on forgetting, 8 marker before that on research into duration, before that, a 16 on the multi-store model, no essay the year before that, and then 2017, which was the first set of exams on this spec, a 16 marker on misleading information. So you can see that we've had essays on a good range of the content, really. You've got a couple of things on eyewitness testimony there. You've got 3 different essays that have come up. You've got a couple of essays on the models. You've got an essay on forgetting. So what hasn't come up? Well, the only thing really that stands out to me is the cognitive interview. Yeah, so could there be a 16 marker? I mean, who knows? But it could come up. And if you're not confident with it, that would be a focus area. That would be my advice. Okay, so the cognitive interview, something like, discuss the cognitive interview as a method of improving the accuracy of eyewitness testimony. 8 marks or 16 marks. Might be worth having a bash at that. Other thoughts, we've had a 16 marker on retrieval failure and interference together. We haven't really seen that as an 8 marker separately, so it could be worth making sure that interference particularly, just because retrieval failure came up last year, maybe make sure you've got some knowledge and evaluation of that. Although, of course, there's nothing to stop them putting retrieval failure back in again this year. A bit like what they did with social influence last year. Not many people thought that minority influence would come up again, but it did. In coding, haven't seen an awful lot of that really over the years. We had that 8 marker on duration. Could they do something similar? Could they say, I don't know, maybe 4 marks or even an 8 marks on research into encoding? Maybe have a look at your Baddeley's acoustic similarity study. Multi-store model used to come up quite a lot. It's obviously a big part of memory. Didn't see it last year. Didn't see it in 2022 or 2021 or 2020. So it feels like, that's only really come up in 2023 recently. Could be something that they sneak in there. Maybe an application question on that. Okay. Let's have a look at attachment then. So again, we'll go through the sort of assessment history. Last year, we had a couple of little questions on interaction. So that's your reciprocity and your interactional synchrony. We had a big sort of knowledge question on monotropic theory, so that was critical period and internal working model, I think it was, and then a 16 marker on institutionalization, so that's your Romanian orphans. When we start to look back at the years before that, again, we'll look at particularly the big questions. So 2023, we had a 16 marker on maternal deprivation. 2022, we had a 16 marker on animals, so that's your Lorenz and your Harlow. Before that, it was an 8 marker on the effects of early experience or the importance of early experience. 2020 was a 16 marker on interactions. That's quite a tough one. 2019, 16 marker on early experience. 18 was learning theory / monotropic theory. Yeah, so sort of like an 8+8, I suppose, but really it's a 16 marker. And then the first set of exams, it was an 8 marker on cultural variation. So where does that leave us? Well, I guess research methods, looking down that list, it's only really sort of come up once in that topic. So could be an area for it. Again, it doesn't really matter which section they put it in, does it? It's going to be there somewhere. Okay, so possible focus areas then. Well, the stages, Schaffer's stages of attachment, possibly. Haven't seen a lot of it. If I was AQA and I wanted to sort of have a bit of a range of questions here, we haven't seen an essay on it. Maybe an 8 marker on the stages, yeah? Discuss Schaffer's stage theory of attachment, or discuss the stages of attachment as identified by Schaffer. Could be. Role of the father, a lot of hype about that last year. Didn't see it. So could it be there this year? Hasn't really come up for a while. I feel like there's hype every year about role of the father, and there's always that little bit of anxiety about, I don't really know much about it. There's not that much in the books. But, it might be there. And we have seen it before for quite a few marks when it came up, so could be something to look at for yourself. The strange situation. That always feels like such a big part of the attachment topic to me, so that the procedure, Ainsworth's research, sort of the types, all that sort of stuff, the behaviours that you'd see. But we haven't seen that much of that recently, so could be a possible focus area. Maybe cultural variation. Could sort of come back up. We've seen a couple of sort of smaller questions recently on it, but I don't know, we didn't see it for a long time before that, so maybe, but yeah, I think stages, possibly role of the father, possibly strange situation as a focus area. All right, let's have a little look at psychopathology then. So last year we had characteristics of OCD, we had a question about explanations for phobias, and then a 16 marker on explanations for depression, which was quite interesting because then the year before actually we had an 8 marker on the ABC model, which is of course, as you know, an explanation for depression. So it's one of those situations where potentially people weren't expecting that to pop up again. But with that we also had definitions, and then before that, I'm not going to read all of these out again, but I'll highlight the key sort of big questions. So over the years we've had also an 8 marker on the genetic explanation for OCD. We've had a 16 marker on definitions, and that was on social norms and statistical infrequency. We've had a 16 marker on explanations for phobias. We've had an 8 marker on OCD, but that time neural in 2019. Before that, it was a 16 marker on CBT, and before that, another definition 16 marker, but that time it was failure to function and deviation from ideal mental health. Again, down the R's on the left there, you can see when research methods has popped up. So a bit mixed, might be there this time, might not. Doesn't really matter, as we said, because it can come up anywhere and it's more about your RM than the actual context, isn't it? But where are we at? Well, what really jumps out here for me is treatments for OCD. Yeah, we have had plenty of essays on, depression recently. We've covered CBT a few years back. We've had some essays, some short essays on explanations for OCD, but OCD hasn't ever been a 16 marker. And if they are going to do that, it feels like they would do treatments because that hasn't been tested. I guess they could do a 16 marker on the explanations, but as you can see, both of those have already come up at various points. So yeah, I'd go over your drug treatments for OCD, SSRIs, and then if you've covered others, things like tricyclics and benzodiazepines, how they work, are they effective, are they appropriate, all that sort of stuff. Definitions is quite a popular topic. It's quite a big topic, of course, comes up quite regularly. We've had 2 16 markers on it. Potentially, maybe social norms hasn't come up recently. If we look at 2022 and 2023, we had definitions questions, but deviation from social norms wasn't in there, so that would be a possible focus area for me. On top of that, just go over your characteristics of all 3 conditions. You can see that seems to pop up quite a lot. Characteristics of phobias might be something that you get maybe a multiple choice or like a 2 marker or something like that in there as well. Okay. Just some general points then to round things off. Only AQA know what AQA will do. I said this last year, and some of what I said last year turned out to be quite accurate, but isn't necessarily going to be the case this year. They have the papers, they know, I don't know, nobody on YouTube knows. If they did know, they're not allowed to talk about it. So take it all with a pinch of salt and really just focus on the things that you know you need to focus on. It's worth taking into account sort of the balance of marks here. So for paper 1, we know it's quite knowledge heavy. There will be quite a lot of evaluation in there as well, but application, although it will pop up, seems to be less comparatively than the other skills. Expect at least 2 16 markers. There might even be 3. It's happened before. So don't be shocked if that happens again. As I said, make sure you've looked at all the subtopics. This is really just to guide some final sort of focus areas. And it is all individual, so bear in mind what you need to do. Paper 1 is out of 96 marks. You know you get 2 hours. As I said, the highest weighting is knowledge and evaluation in this. Make sure you take a calculator. We've talked about research methods popping up. Stats tests probably will be somewhere. I said earlier, last year we had 8 marks of stats test questions on paper 1. So don't get caught out and make sure you take a calculator. You don't want to be relying on your mental maths or your written maths if you don't have to. 30 minutes per section, just keep an eye on time. I know some people like to sort of maybe do all the essays first. If that works for you, great. My feeling with that is you're actually better off banking, or not banking sometimes, you're better off spending time on the smaller questions when you've had a good bash at the essay. Say you've spent 20-25 minutes on it, your time is better off making sure you've covered all the small questions, because you could spend another 10 minutes on an essay, but it isn't necessarily going to improve the level or the quality of it. Yeah, so make sure you've answered all the questions if you can. Box, underline the command words, whatever works for you. You might have come across the bump method, so box the command words, underline other relevant kind of specialist information. Think about how many marks it is and how that breaks down, and then do a plan for the bigger questions. In terms of essays, remember that it's about quality as much as anything else. Your essay is not going to be improved by adding on a load of weaker P or peel paragraphs. It's about that further discussion. Finally, learn and use your specialist terminology. If you write answers that anybody could have written, if you write something and then read it and go, oh, actually, I could have written that without knowing any psychology, you're probably not going to get any marks for it. Yeah. Okay, so that's a few thoughts on what's been happening with paper 1 over the years and some possible focus areas for you this year. However you're revising, whatever you're doing, and whatever else you've got going on, I wish you all the best with it. Good luck. Thanks for listening and being a part of this. If you want to support the channel and help me keep doing what I do, there's some links in the description. Other than that, cheers guys. See you again. Thank you.